Cherie Blair is a leading King's Counsel and lifelong advocate for human rights and the rule of law, and she spent her career breaking barriers in the legal profession and beyond. As the founder of the Cherie Blair Foundation for Women, she's also worked tirelessly to support women entrepreneurs across low and middle-income countries so that they can contribute to their economies and have a stronger voice in their societies. A true global force for change, she's embraced technology, policy, and advocacy to champion gender equality. Mrs. Cherie Blair, it is great to have you at the Swift Hour. Thank you very much for joining us.
Oh, Matt, it's always a pleasure to talk with you.
You and I have known each other for a long time, and I've watched it all. And I've always wanted to ask you, I want to start with a little bit more of a personal question. I've always wanted to ask you, what is it day to day that drives what you do? You travel more than just about anyone I've ever met.
You met my husband then.
but I think a lot of people would say, don't you want to just put your feet up, be in London, and, you know, all of these things, live the good life? But you're on a plane all the time.
No, I am driven to make a difference, to do what I can to change the world for the better. I think it's something that I do share with my husband, and we're not intending to retire anytime soon. We get our buzz, I suppose, by actually doing things and trying to help other people who want to make change, whether that's in business, whether it's in politics, or whether it's in society generally.
Was that something instilled in you at a young age? Was that something that... where did that come about? Where did that happen?
I think it's partly a matter of faith, being brought up as a Catholic, and with this idea at a time when there was the Second Vatican Council going on, this idea that, you know, Christianity is nothing if it's not transformed into actions. What do we do to help other people? What can we do in whatever situation we find ourselves to make a difference, to make the world a better place? I think it's partly something that my mother, my grandmother who brought me up, they felt very strongly about justice and equality. And it's just been something I hope that we've passed on to our children. In fact, I know we've passed it on to our children.
When you think about today, you've had a long and storied career that continues. Can you put into perspective a little bit of how you're feeling about today? And I ask that question because you cannot avoid the headlines, you cannot avoid the rhetoric, the conflict. Even someone said to me yesterday, you know, we're here for the 2025 Concordia Europe Summit, of which you are our esteemed co-chair. Someone said to me yesterday, you know, there does feel like this break a little bit between even the US and UK and these dynamics. Can you put a little bit into context what this era feels like to you?
I think it's an era of uncertainty, and it's not. It becomes more uncertain because we're never quite sure what's going to happen next. Now, in life, you're never quite sure what's going to happen next, but there were certain things, I suppose, we always took for granted, like, for example, the transatlantic alliance, like the fact that Western Europe, NATO as a whole, shared common values, wanted to keep together in order to promote a way of life that respects democracy, freedom, human rights, and the ability of people to make choices and not be told what to do by any government, but particularly one that has strong men who have their views, and if you don't do what they say, they retaliate accordingly.
Do you think, is there a part where you look at the world's institutions today? I mean, you're an expert in the rule of law, you're an expert in these institutions that guide the fundamental foundations of our day-to-day lives. Do you think they're being tested, and are they passing the test today?
Funny enough, last week was London International Disputes Week, because my law firm practices in international arbitration, international commercial disputes, and business and human rights. And I was on the panel there about global change and perspectives, and I was saying that we do live in a time when it seems that the post-war consensus came about because of what had happened in the Second World War and that feeling of never again, which led to the UN, It led to international financial institutions. It led to the belief that there was this Western alliance that stood for justice, freedom, human rights. Suddenly that seems a lot more fragile, and we're being challenged quite strongly by people who think that actually the solution to the problem is populism, the solution to the problem is strong men, and it is actually men, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
You don't have many advocating for strong women.
I think actually the trends have been going down in terms of world leaders that are women, right? It hasn't, unfortunately.
Well, it's never been terrifically high in the first place, for sure. But yes, so this idea that consensus is a dirty word, or that one might is right, seems to be coming from all directions. Whether it's China, whether it's Russia, and sadly to some extent whether it's the United States.
So where does this play into your work, especially around women's rights around the world? I mean, it's in your view. You talk a lot about, and I've seen firsthand the work that your foundation does around advancing women's employment, and some of the barriers that exist to that. Frame that for us, if you can.
Absolutely. Well, I think that what we have seen in the late 20th century and into the 21st century was a general recognition that equality for women, a level playing field that allowed women similar chances to men, was a good thing, that diversity and inclusion made for better decision making. And we've seen time and time again the reports coming out that seem to suggest that that is the case. And we've seen a lot of progress in that. We're here in the stock exchange, the FTSE 300 now has over 40% women board members, and 10 years ago 9%. Mm-hmm. So
there is progress.
There is progress, absolutely. We'd never say that there hasn't been progress. And yet suddenly this seems to have been brought to a sort of screeching halt. And it almost seems as though diversity, inclusion, equality are bad words.
Do you think that part of that was a reactive sort of response from companies, from institutions, to things like diversity, equity, inclusion, that resulted more in perhaps a communications campaign versus something that was actually put into place and into the culture of institutions? It's because there seems to be a fragility to it that didn't necessarily have to be that fragile, right?
Well, let's just be clear that we live in a world which is structurally unequal. It's a man's world built by men for men. And as women entered into the workforce in particular, the idea was they would just slot in to a world which wasn't really designed with their needs, their desires, their talents necessarily in mind. So this is not just about individual biases. It's just a system that was never designed with women in mind. And so we find we have discrimination in our laws, we have workplaces that marginalise, or financial systems that exclude particularly women entrepreneurs. And it makes it harder then for women to access the levers of power, of change that enables them to compete on a level playing field. But I don't think that the businesses that embrace this, and still embrace it, and even the ones who perhaps have gone quiet about it, did it just as a performative thing. I actually think that the evidence that was time and time again we've seen about how diverse decision-making makes for better decision-making, how it increases profits, how it increases a sense of fairness, how it encourages the younger generation who want to see things changed. I think many, many businesses accept that. But some of them have become concerned about the impact it might have upon their bottom line if they're too loud about it. But I don't think that the companies were simply just doing it for show, and they now breathe a huge sigh of relief and say, oh, thank goodness we don't have to let women into our boardrooms or into our executive suite again. They rather think we don't want to go back to the way things were, but maybe we shouldn't shout about it so much because it will bring political consequences.
So when you advise companies, and I know you sit on a number of major boards.
Well, I also, as a lawyer, of course, we
advise.
Advise.
And yes, and counsel many companies. What are those? I often find it's those pivot points. It's those adjustments that maybe people are not always that obvious in the culture of an environment. What is your first step with some of these institutions to say, here's how we're going to change your culture for the better, and here's how you are going to advance opportunity for women?
Well, first of all, let me say, changing a culture takes time. You're not going to get instant change. So as a lawyer, perhaps I would say this, but I think the first step, of course, is through laws. And we have seen that happening. I became a lawyer in the 1970s at a time when we were just introducing the first things like equal pay and anti-sex discrimination, laws against domestic violence. And I've seen in my legal career how those laws formed a floor, if you like, and a basis from which culture can slowly change. But I think I also recognize as a lawyer that you can't, just changing the law does not change the culture. What it might even do is just drive a culture underground. And I think perhaps we were a little naive also in thinking that everybody was going to embrace the idea that a level playing field, that was going to be a win-win situation. In fact, it is a win-win situation in general, because all the statistics show it tends to lead to better growth, better outcomes. But obviously there are going to be people who feel, I missed out. And I think that's where we're seeing some of the backlash, if you like, that we've seen. And I think we have not done enough to explain to men in particular that this is not something that is anti-men. It is about finding the right skills and the right people for the right jobs.
I think that's really important, though, because and I've obviously come from a very Amerocentric view, but I think there was a feeling in the United States of a sense of shame being put on men and a put down, rather than saying, well, no, we want to just simply open the door for the same opportunity for women. So do you think there is potentially a positive element from some of the changes we're seeing now where perhaps that balance might be more adapted?
Well, I think if I felt that the changes we see now had been a moderate adjustment, then I might feel a bit more optimistic about that. But I think what we've seen is a very dramatic reversal where I don't really believe that anyone actually is standing up and calling for conformity rather than diversity, inequality rather than equality, and what's the other one? And exclusion rather than inclusion. Mm-hmm. But the extreme reaction to that, and the reaction to that reaction, mm-hmm. has essentially led to this kind of like fear that we're in danger of throwing the baby out of the bathwater. And the reality is everybody benefits if the right people are doing the right jobs with the right talent, and everybody benefits if we don't suffer from groupthink, if we don't suffer from everybody having the same experiences, because that's not the way the world is. The world is very diverse. And if you're attracting people in a marketplace, if you're wanting to attract talent, you should be open to difference. I also think that somehow we've let some extreme examples and some small examples, like it's like the tail wagging the dog. Do Americans say that as well?
Of course.
So, you know, and in any change, sometimes there can be extreme examples. But to then say, in that case, let's abandon the whole thing, then that's a very dangerous place to be, and you get assumptions and programs being cut which are actually achieving many positive things for everybody suddenly being cast adrift, and that is a bad thing.
But now I think there's an element when I hear you talk about these issues. I imagine quite a bit of it is to some extent talking about what's been happening in the U.S. When something like this movement, this change happens in the U.S., how does that trickle down around the world? How do you see that affect these movements around the world?
Well, we have lived for a long time, throughout my lifetime, in a world where America is very much the dominant force, and America's always been the dominant force, to my mind, that stands up for justice, for rules that are applied fairly, for human rights. And so we now, of course, are living in a world where there are challenges to those views. We speak particularly of China, but Russia is also there. There are other ideas that maybe democracy isn't such a good thing, and that what we need is strong leaders who tell us what to do, or that maybe equality is just for silly people, and actually you just have the strong need to win, rather than bringing everybody along together. And when a country like America starts indicating that may be what they're thinking, then it does have an impact. The speech I made in the London International Disputes Week was also about the importance of countries respecting international law and respecting international agreements. And when you have the biggest, most powerful country in the world suddenly saying we're not going to do that anymore, when you have trade deals which are about you have to do it our way and accept our views, then that does make a difference, I'm afraid.
Are there laws around the world that you could highlight that you want to see changed when you think about women, opportunity, employment? Are there some fundamental laws that might be more common than we realize?
Well, let me say, first of all, I think it's a mistake for any one country to think they have the monopoly of good ideas. And the whole purpose, if we believe in democracy and human rights, is to allow the people of different countries to find a solution which suits them. Which is why sometimes if you find now that America is now saying to Europe, for example, well, we don't like your rules on diversity. We don't like your rules on what should or should not be put on the internet, for example. And we are not going to, unless if you want to trade with us, you have to play by our rules. I think that is quite damaging. It's damaging to the idea of an integrity of individual societies and their ability to make their own rules about how they should govern themselves.
We talked a bit about employment. Let's talk about entrepreneurship for a minute, because this is a central theme for the Cherie Blair Foundation. I've seen it actually firsthand. We were in Georgetown, Guyana, we went to an amazing vegan restaurant.
We did.
We went to a what do you call it? Beauty cosmetics store.
Matt, do you mean to say you're not into your own beauty cosmetics?
I was about to say drugstore, but I don't think it was a drugstore. I think it was a cosmetics something.
Natural remedies and natural beauty products. Yes, very much. Very
exactly.
Green.
So
did you not also come to the brick factory?
I did not see the brick factory, but you went to the brick factory.
Well, so we were very keen to show that women can do all sorts of businesses, not simply what you might, maybe a beauty product in a restaurant, maybe something that you stereotypically think women should do, but actually women can also do heavy construction.
Mm-hmm.
Run those businesses.
So the work that the foundation does, what impact are you seeing today? Talk a little bit about that work.
Well, the foundation is focused on women's entrepreneurship because I believe that if a woman has her own ability to make her own money, to be financially independent, then she can make the choices that are right for her and her families. What we also see from again, the research is that if you do invest in women and allow them to build their own businesses, they tend to the benefits of that tend not to be simply for them, but there's very much a community benefit, whether it's both as role models, but also as providing jobs for the community, providing social programs in the community. So there's a great ripple effect by investing in women entrepreneurs in whatever they want to do. But for many women, it's quite difficult sometimes to set up businesses. And that's for a number of reasons. In many countries in the world, there is not equality of education. Many women do not get educated to the degree that men are in very many countries. Many women get married earlier and then expected possibly to stop their education. So that's one of the problems. They may not have the same literacy skills as men. So what we want to do is we want to provide training to women entrepreneurs, and in particular business training. I'm a lawyer. I did set up my own business with Omnia's strategy, but there's quite a difference between being good as a lawyer and being good as turning that into an actual profitable business. I sometimes think that business skills, unlike possibly baking or sewing, are not necessarily intuitive, but they can be learnt. Mm-hmm. And so we have devised business training programs which particularly are focused on women, bearing in mind the other responsibilities that women have, which mean that they're often time poor, which often mean that some of the societal issues that affect women entrepreneurs, which don't affect men in the same way, are not really addressed. And so we provide our business training. Having now worked since 2008 in this area, we've got a very good idea of what works with women entrepreneurs. And in particular, we use technology to try and reach women entrepreneurs, which we do. We have a digital learning app. It's almost like Duolingo for business, which has now reached over 120,000 women in 6 countries. It was just about to be translated into Arabic, and we're going to go into Egypt in September, so we're very excited about that. We've just had a possibility, we'd love it to do it in Spanish and go into countries in South America. There's a huge possibility of that too, so I can't say too much about that at the moment because we're still in discussions about that. And then we find that financial literacy is such an important matter for women entrepreneurs. That most women entrepreneurs are in small and medium-sized businesses. They find it very difficult to expand their businesses out of there, partly because they find it very difficult to get investment.
Mm-hmm. I was going to say, wasn't there a huge microfinance movement? What happened to that movement? Because it certainly prioritized women, right?
No, it certainly still exists, and we often work with microfinance institutions, and we provide business training alongside the finance, because to some extent it's not enough. Of course it's good to give women money, but if you're talking about developing an economy, if you're talking about developing a business, you also need to have some business training skills. For example, many women with small businesses haven't really understood how important it is to separate your business finances from your domestic finances. So they never really know whether this business is actually profitable or not, because it's all mixed up in, we'll just take some money from here to pay for some family crisis. So we do a lot about training women about proper bookkeeping, proper analysis about profit and loss, how to price your goods, these kind of things, which many women will have never had access to this kind of training before. And doing that alongside institutions that are also lending money can be a very, very fruitful exercise, because it not just doubles the impact, triples the impact, because not only are women getting the money, but they are learning how to spend it wisely. But, you know, so often when we talk about women's economic empowerment, people say to me, as you have just done, oh, microfinance, because the instant idea of a woman businesswoman isn't somebody with a building company that's employing hundreds of people. It's somebody in a small cafe feeding her local community. Both of those things are valid, but I'm very, very focused, and our foundation is very focused in ensuring that those women who have the potential to be business leaders and employ not just 5, 10, but 50, 100, more, hundreds of women and men are also, because they also suffer. So, for example, we have a global mentoring platform where we pair men and women mentors with women mentees from across the world. We're in over 100. We have mentees from over 100 countries that we have referral partners who send those women to us. And I was just in Vietnam recently because we have a project. Our app is in Vietnamese in Vietnam. And I went there and I renewed my acquaintance with a woman called Van Dang. I first met in 2017, and she joined our mentoring platform at a time when she had 50 employees in 2 offices, and her business is developing apps. She was paired with her mentor, who came from Malaysia, and by the end of that year-long relationship, she'd expanded into 5 different offices and had expanded to 100 employees. And that's when I met her, when I went along in 2017 when we launched her venture app in Vietnam. By that time, by the way, she was already, Forbes had a list of women entrepreneurs in Asia, and she was already on that top 50 list. Here we are in 2025. She has 500 employees. She's in 7 countries, and she's recognized as one of the successful businesswomen in Vietnam. Now, if we can help people like her develop their business, raise capital for their business, then we're not just helping her, we're helping huge numbers of people. Or we have take Nigeria, we have a woman called Ella who is in Nigeria. She's got an agribusiness where she sells agricultural product. She had a mentor from the UK, and this is more recently, and she did, as a result of that, she was able to, her profits went up by 30%. She was able to go into new markets, and she now assists 1,500 women farmers in northern Nigeria with how better to grow their products, takes their products, develops their products, and sells them internationally. And she says, there are 1,500 people who are sending their children to school and putting food on the table as a result of her support through the mentoring platform. So these women also are very, very important. And when you think of the most successful women, if you think about venture capital, you must have heard the statistic before, only 2 to 3% of venture capital in the world goes to women-headed businesses. How much more could be achieved if we were able to empower these women?
2%.
Yeah, it's a mistake. It's an accounting error. It's not a really strategy to reach out to women entrepreneurs. So, yes, it's about women at all levels, at all stages of that development of entrepreneurship. Because if you believe, as I'm sure many of the people watching this program do, believe that the way to drive development is to drive the economy and to drive the ability of enterprises to flourish and to grow and therefore benefit everybody. And it's so important to ensure that we also make sure that women get their fair share of that.
I want to bring us back home, back to the United Kingdom, Great Britain, London. We're here for the Concordia Europe Summit, which has been taking place over the last few days. What does it mean to be British to you?
To me, I am very proud to be British. I'm a lawyer, so I think first of all of how Britain and the common law and the rule of law, going back to Magna Carta and going throughout how British law has developed commercial law. I mean, it is the law of choice for so many commercial negotiations. I'm proud of that. I'm proud of our contribution to democracy, of how we, along with our allies, our great allies of America, stood together and stood up to tyranny in the past. And I know that we will do so again.
What when you think about where you are today versus when you were growing up, what is something you wish you could have told yourself at that time when you were growing up, based on your experiences today?
It's very difficult because I think, I don't know why it never occurred to me at the time. Well, I think I do know why it never occurred to me at the time when I was a young woman that I couldn't do what I want, because it's what my mother and my grandmother, and indeed even the nuns who educated me, had encouraged us through education to try and reach our dreams. But no one had actually told me that there was a problem in reaching your dreams because you were a woman. And it was only when I entered into the workforce that I suddenly realised, and then at that time only 10% of barristers were women, so we were very few, and there was a view that women really weren't suitable for the law because they'd just go off and get married and they wouldn't be a long-term investment. In fact, the final bit of my training, at the end there was a place in the chambers, the business that we could join, and there were two people, myself, the woman, and the young man. And even the young man thought I was a better lawyer. But nevertheless, the view of the business was, well, he's a man, so he's a better bet. So here I am. It'll be 50 years next year since I qualified as a fully qualified lawyer. I'm still a lawyer. So I think I was a pretty good bet for that business. The man, on the other hand, well, after 7 years, he went and did something else. And I know that because I married him.
Wow. What a powerful, powerful story. What a way to finish. Cherie, thank you very, very much. It's such an honor to have you and to listen to some of your reflections on things. But also, and I've said this to you before, what I loved when we were in Guyana and we looked at and we met with these women entrepreneurs and we saw their businesses, it was so refreshing to really firsthand see the impact somebody can have. And it says, I think, something that you're here in London and look at the impact you're having on women businesses all around the world. And so I urge everybody to follow what the foundation does and, frankly, to provide their support for what the foundation does. So thank you very, very much.
Thank you, Matt. It's great to speak to you.
Great to speak to you.